The movie Beetlejuice begins with a strong, spooky, yet humorous tone that fits perfectly with its predecessor. Lydia Deetz is a quirky and goth-like character who has embraced her ability to communicate with ghosts. This has led her to host a paranormal TV show called Ghost House, where she interviews people who claim that their homes are haunted. Lydia's uniqueness, style, and fascination with the supernatural make her the perfect host for this eerie show. During the opening scene, Lydia is taping an episode for Ghost House in front of a live studio audience. She interviews a couple who believe their house is haunted by spirits, and Lydia is trying to help them get to the bottom of it. As Lydia talks to her guests, she feels a familiar presence in the room. Scanning the audience, she is startled to see Beetlejuice, a mischievous, chaotic ghost who has haunted her past. Beetlejuice's twisted grin and eccentric personality give Lydia the chills, and she knows his presence can only mean trouble. As soon as the taping ends, Lydia is visibly shaken and heads backstage, where she meets her boyfriend Rory. Rory is not only Lydia's partner, but also her manager. He helps keep her show running smoothly, although his priorities aren't always aligned with Lydia's. Rory notices Lydia is disturbed and tries to comfort her, though his approach is more controlling than supportive. Lydia explains that seeing Beetlejuice again has triggered her anxiety and haunting memories from her past encounters with him. In an attempt to calm her nerves, Lydia reaches for some pills she has for her anxiety, but Rory takes the pills away from her, telling her she doesn't need them. Rory's dismissive attitude shows a lack of understanding, as Lydia insists that she needs the medication to handle the stress. After a brief struggle, Rory tosses the bottle away but fishes out 2 pills that Lydia asks for, just to placate her. Lydia's frustration with Rory's lack of emotional support is clear, but she lets it slide, trying to focus on the more pressing matter at hand: Beetlejuice's return. Just as Lydia is trying to collect herself, her phone starts buzzing with a series of frantic texts and calls from her stepmother, Lydia Deetz. Delia is known for being dramatic and eccentric, but her messages this time are filled with genuine panic. Lydia knows that something serious must have happened. Rushing to Delia's art gallery, Lydia finds her stepmother in a state of shock. Delia, now a successful and somewhat pretentious artist, breaks the devastating news to Lydia. Her father, Charles Deetz, has died. In a rather bizarre and darkly comedic fashion, Charles met his end in a plane crash. While he managed to survive the initial crash into the ocean, he was tragically eaten by a shark. This strange turn of events is depicted in a quirky claymation sequence, emphasizing the surreal and offbeat humor that the Beetlejuice franchise is known for. Lydia is stunned by the news. She and her father had a complicated relationship, but the sudden loss shakes her to her core. Delia, always focused on appearances and her own feelings, immediately begins making arrangements for Charles's funeral. She insists that they must return to Winter River, the small town where they lived during the events of the first Beetlejuice movie, to bury Charles. While Lydia and Delia prepare to return to Winter River, the scene shifts to the afterlife, where we find Beetlejuice working in a dreary department filled with shrunken-headed spirits. His life in the afterlife is far from glamorous, and it's clear that Beetlejuice longs to escape his mundane existence. However, his chance for freedom may come sooner than expected. A ghost janitor is going about his usual duties in the afterlife when he stumbles upon something unexpected. While cleaning, the janitor accidentally revives the remains of a woman named Dolores. Dolores, a sinister figure from Beetlejuice's past, slowly reassembles her body in a gruesome yet eerie fashion. She staples her limbs back together in a creepy scene, emphasizing her dark and dangerous nature. Once fully reassembled, Dolores grabs the terrified ghost janitor and interrogates him about Beetlejuice's whereabouts. Her vengeful rage is palpable, and the janitor has no useful information to offer. In her anger, Dolores drains the janitor's soul, leaving him nothing more than an empty skin bag. It's clear that Dolores is out for revenge, and her target is none other than Beetlejuice. The tension in the afterlife escalates as Dolores embarks on her mission to track down Beetlejuice and exact her vengeance. Back in the living world, Lydia and Delia arrive at Astrid's school. Astrid, Lydia's teenage daughter, is dealing with her own issues. She is considered weird by her classmates and often faces ridicule. Her strained relationship with Lydia only adds to her feelings of isolation. Astrid believes that Lydia cares more about her supernatural dealings and ghostly adventures than she does about her own daughter. This perception has created a rift between the two, with Astrid harboring resentment toward Lydia for being emotionally distant. Delia, always one for the dramatic, decides to make an exaggerated announcement at Astrid's school about Charles's death. She gathers an audience of students and teachers and dramatically reveals that Astrid's grandfather has passed away. Astrid, already struggling with her feelings of being different, is mortified by her step-grandmother's spectacle. The news itself is shocking enough, but the public announcement adds to her embarrassment and anger. Tensions between Astrid and Lydia come to a head as they argue about the loss of Charles and, more deeply, about the unresolved grief over Astrid's father, Richard. Richard died in a tragic accident in South America years earlier, and Lydia has never fully addressed this loss with Astrid. The unresolved grief over Richard's death weighs heavily on both of them, and their inability to communicate openly has only worsened their strained relationship. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, Beetlejuice finds himself summoned by Wolf Jackson, a ghost detective who was once a famous actor in life. Jackson confronts Beetlejuice about a serious issue, the reappearance of Dolores. This revelation makes Beetlejuice extremely nervous, as he knows that Dolores is seeking revenge, and that her return spells trouble for him. In a humorous and dramatic flashback, Beetlejuice recounts his history with Dolores. He explains that they met when he was a grave robber, and despite their unconventional meeting, they eventually married. But their marriage was far from a fairy tale. Dolores turned out to be the leader of a soul-sucking cult, and she tricked Beetlejuice into ingesting poison. As Beetlejuice lay dying, he managed to chop Dolores into pieces. Now, years later, Dolores is back, and she's seeking vengeance for what Beetlejuice did to her. Beetlejuice, always scheming, sees Lydia's return to Winter River as his opportunity to escape the afterlife and avoid Dolores' wrath. He knows that Lydia's ability to see ghosts can help him get back to the land of the living, and he begins to hatch a plan to manipulate her into summoning him. Lydia, Delia, Astrid, and Rory finally arrive in Winter River, where they stay in Lydia's old family home, which sits on a hill overlooking the town. The memories of her time in this house flood back to Lydia, and she can't help but feel a sense of unease being back in the place where she first encountered Beetlejuice all those years ago. After Charles's funeral, the tension between Lydia and Rory reaches a boiling point. Rory, ever the opportunist, sees the funeral as the perfect time to propose to Lydia. He gets down on one knee in front of all the funeral attendees and asks Lydia to marry him. Lydia, clearly uncomfortable and not ready for such a commitment, hesitates. Astrid, who despises Rory, openly expresses her disdain for him, making no effort to hide her feelings. Despite her reluctance, Lydia feels pressured by the situation and reluctantly agrees to Rory's proposal. Astrid, feeling ignored and frustrated, storms off, grabbing her bike and riding through the streets of Winter River to clear her head. While riding her bike around town, Astrid accidentally crashes through a fence and into a tree. Disoriented, she notices a boy named Jeremy Fraser sitting in a nearby treehouse. Jeremy is around Astrid's age, and the two strike up a conversation. Jeremy is friendly and seems to understand Astrid's frustrations. As they talk, Astrid opens up about her strained relationship with her mother Lydia and the recent death of her grandfather. Jeremy listens sympathetically, and the two quickly bond over their shared feelings of isolation and family issues. Astrid is intrigued by Jeremy, and she agrees to meet him again the next day. Little does she know that Jeremy has a dark secret that will soon put her life in danger. Later that night, while exploring the attic of her family's old house, Astrid stumbles upon a dusty model of the town of Winter River. She also finds a pamphlet about Beetlejuice, warning people not to say his name 3 times. Curious and unaware of the danger, Astrid almost says the name, but Lydia catches her just in time and stops her from summoning the trickster ghost. However, Rory, ever the skeptic and eager to show off his new age methods for dealing with Lydia's paranormal issues, decides to take matters into his own hands. He stumbles upon the pamphlet himself, and not believing in the supernatural, says Beetlejuice's name 3 times. In doing so, he unintentionally summons Beetlejuice, dragging both himself and Lydia into the model town where Beetlejuice reigns supreme. Inside the model town, Lydia is once again face to face with Beetlejuice, the trickster demon who has haunted her past. Beetlejuice wastes no time in tormenting Rory, using his nightmarish powers to terrify him. Lydia, knowing how dangerous Beetlejuice can be, manages to pull them back to the real world before things get worse. The next day, Astrid goes to visit Jeremy at his house, where she discovers that he owns a copy of the Handbook for the Recently Deceased, the same book that Lydia had once used to navigate the afterlife. Jeremy explains that he found the book at a yard sale in town, and he begins to show Astrid its mysterious contents. The two make plans to hang out again on Halloween night, setting the stage for even more supernatural events. On the night before Lydia's wedding, Astrid convinces her mom to drive her to Jeremy's house for their planned hangout. When they arrive, Lydia waits outside while Astrid and Jeremy go upstairs to his room. The atmosphere in the house becomes increasingly eerie, and as Astrid and Jeremy talk, strange things begin to happen. When they share a kiss, they suddenly start floating in midair. Jeremy reveals that he is a ghost, having died years ago after falling from his treehouse. He confesses that he needs Astrid's help to come back to life, and that he can help her see her father, Richard, again if she agrees to assist him. As the night unfolds, Lydia becomes suspicious and learns from a real estate agent that Jeremy's house is known as a murder house. Years ago, Jeremy had murdered his parents before falling to his death. Realizing that Astrid is in grave danger, Lydia rushes back to Jeremy's house, but she may be too late. Inside Jeremy's house, Astrid reads an incantation from the handbook, opening a portal to the afterlife. Jeremy's true intentions are revealed. He tricked Astrid into agreeing to give up her life in exchange for his. As Astrid is about to be sent away on the Soul Train, Lydia arrives just in time. Desperate to save her daughter, Lydia rushes back home and summons Beetlejuice for help. Beetlejuice is more than thrilled to have another opportunity to wreak havoc. He agrees to help Lydia, but only on the condition that she marries him, allowing him to escape the afterlife once and for all. Lydia, with no other options, reluctantly agrees to Beetlejuice's terms. Meanwhile, Delia is performing a strange ritual in the backyard, using 2 asps to honor Charles. However, the ritual goes horribly wrong when the snakes bite her, causing her to die on the spot. Dolores, continuing her rampage through the afterlife, reaches Beetlejuice's department and begins searching for him. She drains the souls of anyone who gets in her way, leaving a trail of destruction behind her. Lydia and Astrid reunite with Richard in the afterlife, but their time together is cut short as they must stop Jeremy from getting his past stamped, which would allow him to return to the living world. In a tense and dramatic moment, Beetlejuice tricks Jeremy by stamping his past with the words, "shit out of luck," sending Jeremy down to hell. Back in the living world, Beetlejuice arrives at Lydia's wedding and injects Rory with a truth serum, forcing him to reveal that he never believed in Lydia's abilities and only wanted to marry her for her money. Lydia, furious, punches Rory across the room with the help of Beetlejuice. As Beetlejuice tries to finalize his wedding to Lydia, Astrid finds a loophole in the handbook, revealing that the marriage contract is void. Lydia says Beetlejuice's name 3 times, causing him to inflate and pop like a balloon. In the end, Wolf Jackson takes Delia back to the afterlife, where she is reunited with Charles. Lydia retires from her paranormal show, Ghost House, to spend more time with Astrid. However, in a nightmare sequence, Lydia dreams of Astrid marrying a Dracula-like figure and giving birth to a monstrous Beetlejuice baby. The dream ends with Lydia waking up, only to find Beetlejuice beside her, indicating that he may not be gone for good.